Hi and welcome to today's video. For today's session on Python basics, we'll be covering the if-else statement, the for loop, the while loop. Yes, and we'll cover it extensively. So before we proceed, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification that you can always get notified whenever I'll be releasing a new. Go ahead and open your code editor and create your file. In my case, I've already created mine, main.py. And so we'll start. So I started by mentioning that we'll be doing the if-else statement. So what is the if-else statement? If-else statement is a statement that checks for a condition, and if the condition is met, it executes the code that follows. What do I mean by a condition? Let's say, let me start by creating a variable. A is equal to 10. Maybe B is equal to 5. So we can actually create a statement that checks if A is bigger than B, which is obviously correct since 10 is bigger than 5. Then if that condition is met, it executes the line that follows. So let me go ahead and write if. So after writing if, you need to write your condition. In our case, our condition is A bigger than B. So I'll go ahead and write A. Actually need to note the sign. I'll actually explain about this sign later on. So go ahead and write if A is bigger than B, this sign means bigger than B, it executes the statement that follows. Let's say print bigger. So let's run this. You can see. So it first of all comes to this line. In my case, it's line 6, and it checks, does our program meet the condition? And the condition is A being bigger than B. In our case, A was 10, B was 5, meaning that 10 is obviously bigger than B, meaning that our program met the condition. Hence, it ran this line. So apart from using the if, you can also use the else. So go ahead and add else. Don't forget the colon. So go ahead and write print smaller. What this does is that it actually checks, does our program meet this condition? If our program meets this condition, it obviously runs this. But if our program does not meet, it runs our second one. So we'll actually test this. I could maybe replace, interchange, make this 5, then make B10, and let's run it. See, it actually prints smaller. So let me explain this again. We have the if-else statement that actually execute a line of code depending on whether our program meets the condition. So we started by writing an example here. We created two variables, A and B, A being 5 and B being 10. Then introduced our if-else statement where we said if A is bigger than B. A being bigger than B is our condition. So this is the condition. Let me highlight this. And after that, you need a colon. So if our program meets this condition, it defaults to running this line. It obviously runs this line. But if it does not meet this condition, it runs our second program. So before we proceed, I want us to look at conditions. What are conditions? How do we create our own conditions? So basically, conditions are like states where our program needs to verify whether what you're saying is correct or false. And depending on what it gets, whether it's true or false, it actually runs some code depending on whether it's true or false. So I'll start by identifying the signs. The signs we use, by signs I mean this, we use. So I'll first list them all, then explain them later. Okay, so we have the is equal to. So this means equal to. Don't confuse these two, our single equal sign. A single equal sign is used to assign data to a variable, whereas the double is used in conditions. So I'll first of all list them, then we'll use them. Next is bigger, or smaller. So bigger or smaller. Then next we have bigger or equal to, bigger or equal to, and smaller or equal to. This is bigger or equal to, and smaller or equal to. So this is basically used to create conditions. So I'll give you an example, but before we proceed, you actually need to note something. When we were writing our condition, we actually left some space. You can see that our code editor by default shows where our condition spans, meaning that it highlights the code inside our condition, not necessarily highlight. So the space in between is called an indentation. And for you to create any if or else statement, while statement, for statement, and functions, which we'll learn later, you need to indent, meaning that all the code that is indented is inside this single statement. So and before I forget, let me add something. So we also have not equal to, which is an exclamation mark, then the equal sign, equal, and not equal to. So when you're using the equal or not equal to, this is mainly used in numbers, same as bigger or, no, let me correct something. Equal to or not equal to is used with both numbers and strings. By strings, we mean words that are enclosed by a quotation mark. So you can actually compare two strings and check whether they're the same. So let me write an example. Let me erase this. So I'll go ahead and write if, let me create a variable name. Then our string army if name is equal to, remember the two equal signs, don't confuse them with the one equal sign, equals to army print correct if we run this, you can see it prints correct. But if we even change a single letter, let's say omit an R and run this again, you can see it doesn't run anything. So let's use our else statement as we have learned. Don't forget the colons. Print incorrect. And I'll run this. You can see if our first condition is not met, it obviously defaults to our second condition. So bigger or equal to is simple. I don't think I need to do that as an example. And by default, you know that it's used with numbers bigger or equal to a certain number, bigger or smaller, and equal to or not equal to. So inside our if statement, apart from the if and else, you also have another statement, not necessarily a statement, but we have the elif. We have the elif. So let's say, let me create age. Let's say for the age, I could maybe give it 25. Then I'll go ahead and write a statement which checks the age and tells you whether it's old, whether it's someone old or someone young. So if age is smaller than 20, meaning that by age we're referring to our variable, it checks the variable and cross-checks this. I'll go ahead and try to print teen for teenager. Then let's say I want to include another condition, but inside this. So here's where elif comes in. It enables you to use more than one condition in one statement. So I'll go ahead and maybe write if age smaller than 35, print you. Then I could maybe add another one. If age is bigger than 70, print elderly. If age is smaller than 20, teen, age is smaller than 35. So whenever we are running this, the program runs this in the order it is, meaning that if it's 20, it will reach here and stop. If it's 35, it will reach here and stop. And if it's 70, it will reach at the third condition and stop. So let's run this. It was categorized as youths. What about if we use 15? You can see the value is different. Maybe let's say 100 elderly. So it basically checks the variable, and the variable is included in our condition, checking whether it's smaller than 20, smaller than 35, or bigger than 30. So that's how we include more than one condition in an if statement. So something else, instead the if, you can also use the not value. So what does not do? So let me erase this. Let's say let's say it's like applying for a driving license and they need to check your age. And where I am in Kenya, the legal age is 18. So we want to create a statement which checks whether the user's age is 18, and if not, is above 18, and if not, he or she cannot get access. So I'll go ahead and write if not, let me write and explain, age is bigger or equal to 18. So this sign is bigger or equal to, meaning that it checks whether the age is bigger than our value 18 or equal to our value 18. To understand this more, you actually need to do a number of examples, and maybe more preferable project-based learning. So if not age bigger or equal to 18, write print under age. Okay, so let's run this. So our age is 10. So this condition is the age is bigger or equal to 18. But now we added a keyword not, meaning that if our condition is not met. In the other instances, we were checking for whether our condition is met. But inside this instance, we are checking whether it is not met. That's why we've included the word not. So if we run this, you can see it checks if our condition is not met. You actually need to know the difference, and prints under age, since our age value is 10. We should actually do another example. So let's say time. Let's say let's check for hours, and maybe want to check whether our hours are equal to a day. So if our hours are less than a day, it ends up telling us that it is less than a day. And if it's more than a day, it prints more than a day. So how do we do this? If not hours bigger than or equal to, 24, a day as 24 hours, tell it to print else print more than a day. So if it comes and checks this, if ours is not bigger or equal to 24, it prints this, meaning that if this condition is not met, by default, our value is bigger than 24. So let's run this. You can see it tells us less than a day. But what if we use 40? We print this, gives us more than a day. Next, we'll go into the while loop. Let me erase this. So what are while loops? While loops, similar to if-else statement, also take a condition, but there's actually one big difference that makes the while loop stand out. The while loop runs the code under it for multiple number of times until the condition is not met. Let me write this so that you can explain. Let's say I want to take I have a number. Assign it to 1. No, let me assign it to 0. So I want to run some commands until our number, let's say, is 10. While number is smaller than 10, do this. What do you want? Let's say we print the number. Then I'll come and write number is equal to number. I'll actually explain what this means. Plus 1. So what this does, we've already created our variable number and assigned it to the value 0. Then we go ahead and create a while statement. So what this does is it checks while number is smaller than 0, meaning that until the variable number is bigger than 10, it will continue running this, meaning it will run it for more than 1. Then inside our statement, what we want it to do, we want it to print the number so that we can check the value of our number. Then next here, we want to add for each turn, we want to add 1 to our variable number. Let's run this. So you can see it starts with 0. It goes ahead and check, is the number smaller than 10? Yes, it is, since number is 0. Then it starts by printing number, and it adds a 1. So what this line does is that it tells the program that the variable number is equal to the previous value of our variable number plus 1. Then assign this whole new value to the same variable number. So it says that number, take the previous value of our number variable and add 1. Then assign it to the same variable. So and you can see, after doing that, it then repeats the cycle. It goes and checks. So let's say it found it was 0. Then it came and added 1 to 0, so it became 1. Then it comes. Is number smaller than 10? It is still smaller than 10, since now it's 1. Then it prints 1. Then it repeats the process until number becomes 10. So when, let's say we are in the ninth cycle, so we go ahead and print 9, then we do number equals number plus 1. So we do 9 plus 1, which is 10. Then when we are trying to go back to the while statement, it checks, is number smaller than 10? So our program identifies that the condition is not met, since our value is 10, since we added 9 to 1. And so it stops running. If you actually don't include such a statements, which ensures that your condition change, it will actually run and you will actually be able to stop it. That's why you're running adding 1 to our variable. So let's say we want to reach a certain number, then stop the turns. Let's say we want our program to reach number 5, then stop printing and stop running this other code. So how do we do this? Go and write an if statement. So inside, we are using an if statement inside the while loop. So by loop, we mean do something over and over again for a number of times. So I'll go ahead and write my if statement. If number is equal to 5, I want it to break. What this does is that it tells our program to stop with the loop, to stop and exit with the loop. So let's run this. You can actually see when it reached 5, it stopped and it did not go on with the loop. So next we're going to cover the for loops. So for loop is somewhat similar to while, in that the code under it is ran for a number of times. Let me write it. So for loop for, let me erase this. So this is the structure of a for loop. For our first case, I'll use range. Let me write it then explain. For I in range. So our range takes a value of how many times you want to go through with this loop. So let me just scan. Don't forget the colon. Then you write the code you want to be run. Let's say in my case I want to print I. So let me explain this before I run it. So we have the for I in range 10, print I. I in this case, it's not a must for you to use the word I. You can use any letter, you can even use a word. But the essence of it is that it represents all the values generated in the range with this variable. So they are all tied to this variable I. And so for you to access those values generated, you can actually print that value I to see what our program generated. But when you're using the word range, it is mainly used to generate numbers. So it generates numbers, and in programming, numbers start with 0. So in our case, if we run our code, let's do it, actually generate numbers from 0 to 9. So you actually need to note this. Numbers in programming, not necessarily Python, but also other programming languages, numbers always start with 0. And we said for I in range 10, it still gives us 10 numbers. If we count this from 0 to 9, it's 10. But you can see it doesn't include the number 10, since our number starts from 0. So we can use for I in range 10. Then we can print the values. So let's say we want to do this, but we want to start from 9 to 0. We go ahead and write for I in reversed. Then inside the reversed, use the range. Then inside the range, use a number. Then you can actually note the difference. In our first case, we started with 0 to 9, but in our second case, we started from 9 to 0. So apart from generating numbers, we can also use the for loop with lists. So let me create a list. Let's say the list is names. Remember, our list can have data of different, can have values of different data types, but in my case, I'll only be using strings. So let's say I want to go through all the values inside our list and maybe, let's say, print them. So how do I do this? This is made possible using the for loop. So for I in, then our variable name. So you say that the I is it's not a must for you to use the word higher. You can use another letter or even a word, but it's basically a variable that stores the values generated. You are looping through this. And so to get those values, we print. So go ahead and run this. You can actually see it goes ahead and goes through all the values inside our list. This is actually a typo. It should be James. And then after going through the loop, it prints them. It prints them individually. Thank you for staying tuned. That's all we have for today. So we've gone through the while statement, the while loop, the for loop, and the if statements, the if else, if elif, and we also learned how to create the various conditions and check whether the conditions have been met using using these loops and if statement. So don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification. Let's meet in the next video. I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to comment on what you'd like to learn and also make suggestions on how I could better this Python basics course.